welcome back. It is Tom Stevens, your resident psychotherapist with Reaction Therapy, and also with Nick Stevens, the resident engineer, producer, director, the man who runs the show. We've got an amazing podcast for you today. Just wait.
Yep.
He's about to tell you. Nick,
and I'm ready for it.
Take it away.
Ready for it. This is season 3 of our podcast, so we've kind of adjusted things. We just did them in number order. We're still going to keep putting the number of the episode, but I've categorized them into seasons now. So this is season 3. This is our first episode of season 3. And this will be going on our main channel now, as we will bring y'all announcements later. Maybe in the extra episode, we'll bring y'all some announcements of what is happening with our second channel. So I'm excited for this, but to open up season 3, we're going to talk about a mental health topic, and that is addiction.
Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah, very, very big one. We've talked a little bit about addiction throughout our shows just because it is related to a lot of mental health issues.
Yeah.
But today is focused solely on addiction. So before we get into that, I want to go to our intro topic. I fixed the transition, so these will work now.
Let's see it. Oh, man. Did you see that? Everybody see that?
Everybody see that? Yeah, our intro topic today, I wanted to talk about something recently that happened in the world of music. That has nothing to do with addiction at all. I don't think it could. Maybe it could. Morgan Wallen is the topic of discussion for right now.
Sand beneath my boots?
It's sand in my boots, actually.
Or sand in my boots?
Not beneath. It's in.
Probably better to be beneath than in, I guess.
I guess it's true. Have you heard anything recently what happened with Morgan Wallen?
I saw some video clip of him canceling a concert right before the concert, and I heard 2 stories. One was that he was wasted, drunk, and couldn't stand up.
Maybe it does have something to do with addiction.
And then I heard another one that he lost his voice.
Yeah.
So who knows which it is?
I just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was fascinating that literally I saw people saying, like, right before he went on, the opening acts went ahead and did their thing.
Oh, so they played. Okay.
Yeah, so I heard that the opening acts did their thing, and like 5 minutes before he was supposed to go on stage, a big message flashed on the screen that said he was canceling the show.
I didn't see that message or anything. I don't know what they said that happened. Did they actually say what happened?
I don't think they did. I've heard stories and messages.
What have you heard,
people
Nick?
have
what
said
have your
that
insiders said?
My insiders, I don't have insiders. My Instagram and TikTok and different things like that have told me that basically what happened is he lost his voice. He knew about it beforehand. He said he did this show either the night before or the night before that. The night before. He did a show and his voice was kind of going on him, and he was trying to rest up so he could be ready for the show, and he just didn't feel like he felt like right before the show he didn't feel like he could do it. People are very mad though. I wanted to see what your opinion on that is, because people were very upset. It's like, so how do you let the opening acts go and you just randomly decide that you don't want to do it? Like if you're gonna make plans like that, then how about you tell them, like, when you're feeling bad, like, just, I can't do the show tomorrow, or give them like 24 hours notice. That's what you do in your office. Like, I mean, you want people to do that for you, but also if you need to not see clients unless it is an emergency.
That's what this could be.
It could be.
I've woken up in the morning and been completely sick and had to call my assistant and say, I can't go in today. Like, there is no way. I can't, not even just being contagious. I can't speak, or I can't, I'm nauseous or whatever. I literally can't. I'm really sick. And she'd had to cancel my whole day, which happens with people. So if it's a dire emergency, you'd want to let people know as soon as possible.
Yes.
And with this one, the weirdness, I didn't hear that before that the opening acts went.
Yeah.
I would have wanted to put the announcement out as soon as they knew this wasn't a go. Yeah. I don't think they knew it was a no-go last minute like that. I think they probably knew hours ahead that he is not going to be in shape to do this.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because there was another country artist who had the same thing happen.
Bring that up next.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember who that was, but I remembered that happening. I remember him going on stage. Well, go ahead. You tell the story.
Yeah. So
if that's the same guy.
Yeah, it's the same guy. I was just, to me, the whole point of like, I get it.
Did you think it was real? You think he was sick? Or you think he was wasted?
I don't think he was wasted. He could have been. Who knows? Who knows what goes on behind the scenes? But for me, it just doesn't make any sense why you would let the opening acts go before you put that announcement out, because then people are all excited. They're in the stands. They're like, okay, like once, like it's kind of like, I don't know what to compare it to. It's like when something starts happening, then you're like, okay, this is going to go on. Like there's no way it's not happening now. But so fans would think like, okay, the opening acts are going, so this show's going to happen. But then it's like, how do you what? There's some miscommunication here. Something's not adding up. So I wasn't sure about that. But the other guy is Luke Combs. That's the other country artist name. And I watched the video because, of course, they're very like correlated right now with how it's like Morgan Wallen. How do you not like take a message from Luke Combs? Like how do something like that? And that
was a while ago too, I think.
Yeah, it would make sense though if they did it because he was wasted, because that might be a good explanation for why he did that. Like that's kind of,
he's coming to Houston. We'll find out.
We'll find out there. But so Luke Combs did
to spend that much money on tickets. To drive somewhere, and some
That's
people
what
drive. Like we're going to NF in Fort Worth. It's 4 hours away.
Yeah.
We're gonna spend the night in a hotel. It's gonna cost a lot of money. I can feel for people who went there and were planning on a concert and saw the opening acts.
I heard I read comments that said, okay, but what about the airplane tickets I took to get here, the hotels, the food, the money, like just all that money that I'm having to spend for nothing. It's like, what do you do for that? Because they're going to refund the tickets. At least Morgan Wallen said that. But
that's it.
It's like there's a lot like we were thinking about NF tickets. It's like, okay, it's not just tickets for that. Like we have to drive 4 hours, like it's
$1,000 to $1,500 trip just for the three of us. And a lot of people, it's very hard-earned money and you can't get it back. I would be upset if I went to a concert and had that happen the way you laid it out.
Yes.
I thought once people got there, they made the announcement and the show was kind of canceled. There were no opening acts, but I didn't realize.
It's crazy to me. Anyway, so the Luke Combs thing, what he did was he went on stage and he said, look, like I was trying to get my voice ready. I'm not going to be able to give you all the best show I can tonight. So I'm going to refund all your tickets. We're still going to do the show.
Wow.
Y'all are going to have to help me sing though. Like he was going to rely on them to help him sing. Like the band was still going to perform.
Yeah.
He was still going to try to sing, but he just couldn't sing the best he could. So he said, I'm still going to do this show. We're going to do the best I can, but I'm going to need y'all's help and I'm going to refund your tickets.
That's
like
the thing for me.
That's how you do it.
To be able to go out and mouth the words or start a song like there once was,
and
start
also,
a song
yeah,
and let people pick it up, because in a stadium everybody knows the songs and they would all sing it for you and you could just stand up on stage.
And also there's so many artists now that they do shows and a lot of them have the music playing behind them, so they might sing parts of it but they have their voice in the on the whatever a song behind them, so like they don't have to sing the whole thing.
I think it's more in rap music. I'm not sure in country, but
maybe. I don't know.
I mean, y'all would know. I haven't been to a country concert in a long time. Either. But I do think it's quite a story.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to bring
it up. About that, Nick.
Well, I was just curious on what your thoughts were, because it's a very interesting storyline. But yeah,
my thoughts are you should tell people as soon as you know something for sure. But if he was determined, he was like, let's pretend it's not the drunk thing. And he was like, I really want to try to go. And doctors were finally saying, you can't do this because you have shows coming next week and the week. Like, that's what they have to look out for, is you don't just end here. Like, you can get yourself sicker and then end up canceling other shows.
Yeah. Just sucks for if you were in that.
And he's had some issues. Like, from what I heard before, he was like close to getting canceled or something. Like, I don't know a whole lot of Morgan Wallen, but I know everybody loves him.
Yeah. And
he's touring and he's popular. He's coming to Houston, like I said. So more power to him. I hope he does great. I hope he gets well.
Yeah. Hopefully everything's good. But anyway, okay. Spend enough time on that. Let's go to our topic of the day. Speaking of, what were we going to say? Speaking of what? Morgan Wallen?
Just when we talked about the possibly being drunk, the addiction thing.
It's true.
One of the biggest brought up topics in any comments we have at Reaction Therapy is addiction and how to handle it. And so we need to do this in a live podcast. Like, this needs to be live where people in the moment can ask us, because there is so much that this is spread out to, not just drugs and drinking, food, sex, gaming, money, exercise. Like we can go
just
on
keep
and
going,
on,
bro.
right? Every potential thing that's addictive.
Hey, keep note on that, because in a couple weeks to a month, we're gonna have that live podcast. So be ready
Been waiting
for it.
for months, y'all.
Be ready for it, because it's coming. We'll give you an announcement a week or two in advance, so y'all can get ready to be there when we do it live. So what we're gonna do with that is we're gonna post it. We're gonna do it live and then post it on our next podcast airing. So that's how we're gonna do it. All right, let's go into addiction. First off, what is an addiction? Versus, I want to know, like, what is an addiction from your standpoint versus what people say is an addiction, because you as a mental health professional might have a different way you describe addictions from what people just think they are.
Yeah, I'm not going to give the American Medical Association's definition of addiction. I'm going to tell you this, though. An addiction is a compulsive attachment to something, some type of behavior, some type of substance in your life that you cannot function normally without. And that doesn't mean, hey, I can stop drinking whenever I want. And I've seen alcoholics who are addicted to alcohol who drink 3-4 times a year. Honestly, they don't even drink every day. But when they do drink, it sends them over the deep end. So an addiction is when you are compulsively drawn to some substance, some experience, some behavior. So it could be anything, because people could be addicted to running. Like when you cannot say no, it is stronger than you are, and you cannot go on functioning normally without it. In other words, it is something that you have to have in your life on a regular basis. And when you have it in your life, it is destructive to you. It turns you into an unhealthy person. It makes you worse as a person. It's a progressive illness over time. So it doesn't just stay the same. It's progressive, means it intensifies. Whatever you use or you're addicted to, it only intensifies over time, and it's something that you don't have power over.
Gotcha. Yeah. That whole thing of progressing, it reminds me of the whole topic of, like, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. It's kind of like an addiction. If you're not making steps to try to heal, which we'll talk about in a little bit of how you like heal an addiction, you're always it's going to get worse and worse. So that whole thing about it will just get worse. It doesn't get better nothing gets better with time.
Yeah. Bad news never gets better with time.
Bad news gets better with time.
The addictive piece, and you're right, it doesn't flatline. And so you're either moving towards recovery or you're moving towards addiction every day. And people in 12-step programs will tell you this, like, am I acting in recovery today or am I acting in addiction? And it doesn't mean even I'm using, but when people have addiction, you don't lose it. It never goes away. You can recover it. You can arrest it. You cannot erase it, though. Just know that.
That was one of my questions also. Can addiction ever go away?
No.
So no.
It can't. It's always drawn to it. And you are always super likely, if you're around it enough, to go back into it. What people with addiction learn to do is to stay away from what that is. And they also redefine what their draw to that substance is. But any addict would tell you, man, what it felt, the high I got when I was using or in addiction was so strong. And what they learn is, I don't want to be fed by that anymore. So it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Difference between experimentation, we'll talk about experimentation, problem, and addiction. When you're in an experimentation or problem phase, you can recover, you can erase it. But once you get to the addiction phase, you cannot.
So yeah, that kind of leads me. Yeah, take a sip. Been talking a lot. My next kind of question that
It's water.
I promise it's not alcohol. Just kidding. Why would it be? So kind of leads into what you were saying. How does addiction like come about? Like, you obviously are living your life, and then all of a sudden, do you just stumble into something and it turns into addiction, or what are some ways that it can come about?
Yeah, as they say, caught off guard in 12-step, caught off guard under the right circumstances, boom, there pops the addiction or a relapse to addiction. Many times, you ever notice how people are addicted to something? They are addicted to something. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 or 3 things, but typically it's one hardcore thing they're addicted to. And it's like, why aren't people in addiction addicted to just everything then?
That's true.
And it's because at the point you become an addict, or you become, a problem user of any substance or thing, behavior, it is what satiates you. It satisfies you at the moment. So whenever your struggle, your life hits a low, and you find this thing that gives you a high, that is your starting point. And so people tend to latch onto that. If it's food, if it's drugs, if it's drinking, if it's sex, if it's money, whatever it is that gambling, whatever it is that you latch onto, it's that thing that gives you that high. Because you'll notice some people who are, addicted to food don't smoke cigarettes, don't use drugs, and sometimes don't even drink alcohol. And you think, because food is their thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so whatever the addiction is tends to be what that person holds on to.
Isn't it also, just from my thinking, people who are addicted, I mean, people can be addicted to multiple things, but
Yes.
I feel like the reason why people latch onto one thing so much is because it takes over. Like, it's almost like it just is, like, once that thing hits, it's like you don't really have time to do other things because it just takes over you, and that's what you think about. It's kind of like when you get married, the goal is for your husband or wife to be that person that you're with. You don't want to go over and, people do have affairs, but that's for other reasons. But when you really love someone, you don't go around and try to sleep with other people. It's like, that's your one person.
There's no need.
Yeah.
So dating is a good example of that. When you first start dating somebody and it's like, man, I'm thinking about them all the time. I can't wait to see them. I get a smile on my face when I think about it. It kind of gives me that dopamine hit, that high, and that everything else goes away. You don't even notice if other girls or guys are looking at you. You just don't notice because you have your mind set on that. Yes, addiction takes everything from you, makes you push everybody else around you away, and you're not emotionally available to people because that thing requires all of your existence.
All right, let's go into more of we're probably gonna have to do a part
By
two
the way,
to this.
what people say addiction is, you had that as a part of the question too.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people attribute addiction to super hardcore, like vagrant, horrible, nasty.
Yeah.
When they look at me and say, you know, a guy or a girl who's addicted to alcohol that only drinks 4 times a year. Yeah. You know why? Because they do not let themselves around it the rest of the year. And then when they go to Vegas or they go to the Caribbean or they go on a vacation and they start drinking or cruise and they end up in the hospital or they end up arrested or they end up on the street, like they go all out, but the rest of the time they keep themselves away from it, kind of forced.
Yeah.
Addiction is not just this. You see addicts, addiction is everywhere.
Yeah.
There's people you talk to every day who are in addiction. They might not be in a 12-step program or have admitted it or whatever, but they are in some type of addiction, and there are spectrums of it, right?
Yeah. And it's almost like that whole thing when you were saying how people can be addicted to something and only do things a certain time, like a couple of times a year maybe, but it's almost like it, and we're talking about how to, like, ways to get around addiction and how to cope with it, but it's almost like that's their coping mechanism is, I'm not going to do this. And then and when you do that, I've learned through, like, just not counseling, but with mentors that I've had, people have said, when that happens, it's actually not good to just cold turkey, not just to avoid it, because once you do break, it's going to be like hardcore.
Yeah.
So
you have to be careful with that. And you also need a strong support system around you because withdrawals are brutal.
Yeah, it's true.
Mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
Tons of different addictions. So many different ones.
Well, okay. That you're doing great with me today because you're leading into everything that I'm going to next. I don't know what's happening right now. So what are some examples of some addictions?
Well,
I mean, you've already listed a lot of them.
Yeah, we mentioned a lot. I mean, you can pretty much list anything, whether
Anything.
it's drugs or drinking or food or sex or money or gambling or work
Yeah.
or exercise or body image.
True.
When it comes to your body image, when it comes to plastic surgery, we've had people in addiction who just can't stop getting plastic surgery. So the bodybuilders, same thing. You have so many different types of addictions, especially in today's world with social media,
Tons.
that the key is because
Social media can be one.
I can go exercise and want to do it because I exercise and I feel better. And an addict who over exercises, cannot function the rest of the day until they get that done.
Yeah.
And like I said, I treated this one guy once who said he wouldn't jog unless he could go 6 miles or more on his jog. So he was a runner. And I said, well, what if I told you, I'm going to average 6 miles for you. But during a week, I told you one day you're going to go out and jog 1 mile. One day you're going to jog 10. One day you're going to jog 4. He said, no, we just wouldn't do it. If you told me less than 6, I just wouldn't go. So he has to have it a certain way, and he would keep going because he's not satisfied unless he gets that high and that completion piece. I treated a boy a long time ago, he was about 10 years old, who was addicted to reading books. Most interesting thing in the world. He could not stop reading at the kitchen table, in his room. The parents, he couldn't even like function normally and play and study for school. Like he was a smart boy. They caught him in the bathroom. He would turn the shower on and say he's taking a shower, but he was really sitting in there with a stack of books, reading the books. Like it was so hard. He could not stop. And so I was treating him for that. Anything can be an addiction. And so I want you to see that it's horrible, it's the end of the world. It's that you need to arrest it and get something in place to treat it, or else it will only progress worse.
Wow.
Lots of different addictions. We could name them all day probably.
All right. And then, I mean, obviously we're going to keep going, but the last question I have for you, and then we can just talk about it, is what are the steps, now that we know what addiction is, what are the steps to kind of, if you're dealing with addiction, how do you get it to, I don't know what the right word is. Recovery, yeah.
Abstinence. Well, abstinence is first. I mean, that's the thing you want first. Like you go to a 12-step program, let's take alcohol. It's the easiest one. It's been around forever, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. But the first thing they'll tell you is they just want you to start practicing abstinence, just to not drink today. If you can't not drink today, then don't drink this hour. Don't drink this minute. Just whatever you could do. So abstinence is first. That means stopping whatever you were doing. The recovery piece is once you work yourself, your character, your spiritual life, and your behaviors into a place where you have a stronger sense of yourself. You have a stronger sense of your spiritual growth. You have a stronger sense of your character, and you don't need that substance anymore. So the way I describe it is people very often when they start recovery, let's say they want to stop doing something, drinking alcohol. Every day, you notice how I'm going up and up and up. Every day, they're more likely to drink again. It sounds crazy, right? You stop drinking, you're more likely to use again every single day, and tomorrow even more, and next week even more likely, until it crescendos at a point. It could be weeks down the road, months down the road, years down the road, till it crescendos at a point and it curves and it starts going down, and then you're less likely to drink again. And that's when recovery really kicks in, meaning I'm less likely to go do that thing today than ever because I have so much recovery and I feel so much better about myself, and I just don't need it anymore. And so that's what addiction will do to you, is it will convince you that you're going to need me the rest of your life. Best way to do it, 12-step program. I mean, the easiest, most standard thing to do is a 12-step program because it is grounded in lots of key principles that are needed, and it tells you exactly what to do to move away from the addiction you had and into recovery of yourself, both spiritually, behaviorally, and personally, with your character and the way that you act towards people. Because people who are in addiction, they lie a lot, they cheat a lot, they deny a lot, they can't own their feelings, they don't do well with feelings, so they have to learn to act a whole new way.
Well, and it's a lot of, I think, feeling that way is a lot of guilt, and you just don't. It's like you want to keep it hidden. It's like the stuff. It's like that one drawer in your house or the closet that you don't want people to see that almost. And it's the same way I feel like with addiction. It's like I'm gonna ignore it. I'm not gonna show. I'm gonna push it away. And a lot of people with addiction, they do their addiction by themselves, or with groups that also have.
It's in secret addiction. Or it's socially acceptable. Yeah. They find people to do it with where it's acceptable. And, a few things we didn't mention. One you did actually mention, which is gaming. We didn't mention gaming. You mentioned social media. Yeah. I was thinking of gaming and vaping combined with social media. Those three in today's world, we don't talk enough about. That there is heavy addiction in social media, people who can't get off of it. Think of what you do when you get in an elevator, sit in a waiting room, sit at a stoplight in your car, get home, go to the bathroom, whatever you're doing, sit in a movie. People are constantly looking at social media on their phones. Think about what young people today, teenagers and young adults, are doing when they're home by themselves, gaming, and hours and hours and hours, and can't stop. And think about vaping. That wasn't there when I grew up, Nick. Vaping's there now, and it seems like this painless kind of, we're not smoking these carcinogens out of these cigarettes with the tar. We're just vaping this invisible vapor. But we don't even have the studies that are going to come out probably 5 years from now that show the significant damage that vaping has done. And by the way, vaping with college students I treat has been the hardest thing for people to get off of, more than even cigarettes. And cigarettes used to be the worst, but now it's vaping.
It's crazy. You've heard, I mean, I think we've all heard those TikToks or Instagram, speaking of social media, but we've heard on those platforms that how bad I've heard the videos where vaping, people have no idea what vaping is going to end up because they just don't have the information on it yet. And after vaping is over, if it takes its turn, like we went from cigarettes to vaping, there's going to be something else that comes up. There's always something. And my whole thought when you were saying that is no addiction that you have, and there's a comment that we're going to get to later. We're going to do a Q&A. I read something before this about a good addiction. And my thought is, I don't feel like there is any good addiction. I feel like all addiction by the definition means it's something you can't live without. And I don't feel like there's anything in this world that you can't, that it's healthy to say that you can't live without it. Like that just seems like not a good place to be.
Well, there are some that are, we talk about the term healthy addiction, but I don't think that's really an addiction. That's just kind of more of an outlet or something people really like to do. But there are addictions that are more damaging than others. So rather than saying some addictions are good, it's saying some are just more damaging. But somebody who likes to jog and exercise, well, that can be really healthy. But if you go too far and it takes over your social life and you can't go to work or school because you need to finish a run, or you can't, your body starts to lose mass or start to break down because of all your running and you still can't stop anyway, that could be a problem.
Like it is, like for me, like I feel like a healthy thing for me that I've really tried to start doing these last couple months has been going to the gym very consistently, trying to get healthy. But I understand that I don't want to be a person who gets addicted to going to the gym. I want to do it as something that is healthy for me, but not to where a point where it's like I can't live without going. Yeah. That's why I think it's important to have days off from the gym, at least for me. If y'all don't work out, you might not understand what I'm meaning, but for me, it's important to have days off where you don't go to the gym so your mind doesn't get trained to just like, oh, that's what I do every day and I'm just going to keep doing it. And that can go in so many other different ways other than the gym. Like if you say, I want to read a book or read part of a book every day. It's like you might want to take a couple of days off every now and then just so you don't get in, because habits and addiction can start very easily.
And know the difference between them. There are habits. There are people that just creatures of habit. They do things religiously. Yeah. It's different than an addiction.
That's true. It's also true. All right. Okay. Is there anything else on this addiction that we're going to have to do a part 2 because we didn't get through everything?
Well, I think we need to understand and maybe go a little bit more into how they start.
Okay.
And that's not a now thing probably, but how they start and how we touched on, when people's lives get to a point, stress or anxiety or trauma, and then they latch onto something that they use and it gets them high. But also the reality that high, anybody who's close to or in an addiction, that high does not actually solve any problem that you go to it to solve. In other words, I can't cope, I'm really stressed out, or I'm really hurt, I'm damaged, I'm stuck, I feel rejected, and so I need to go use something, or I need to act out, or they never fix the problem, right?
They actually make you feel worse a lot of times.
It makes you feel worse, which creates the guilt and the shame. And once the guilt and the shame kicks in, the only way, which lasts a little bit, but the only way to kick back in after that is to be able to use again, because you can't stay in the guilt and shame. It keeps you so far down. And so you go act out again and use, and that makes you feel okay again. And then you got the guilt and the shame. So the desire, the guilt, the shame is a vicious cycle. But we got a lot more we could talk about with it.
So if y'all want a part 2, make sure you like this podcast and you comment it down below that you want to see another part, because we just don't have time.
There's a lot to go into addiction.
All right. Next, we're going to do a couple questions from Q&A, and I'll leave some of these questions for part 2 if we do it. Yeah. So
cool.
Q&A time.
And I will say this too, piggybacking the last one, Nick, that as a mental health professional, there's more addiction today than 28 years ago when I started doing this. Really. Like it's a lot more prevalent now because I think a lot more is available, a lot more is more normal and acceptable. And also, it's not frowned upon as much. It's not looked at as much of a negative anymore. They're all kind of coping skills. And we need to be real careful with what's a coping skill. Like just to chill out. It's like somebody says, I have a glass of wine or have a beer, after work. Well, there could be coping skills. And then there's, I really kind of need this if I'm going to chill out at home. That would be where there's a problem.
Gotcha.
Most people don't want to hear that though, Nick.
All right. First question. It'll be on the screen. How can you quit porn addiction? Because I'm tired of being depressed and anxious. So that's a part of addiction we didn't really talk about.
Very good point. Yeah. Well, it's kind of in the sex addiction arena, but pornography is a big one too, especially with the advent of social media that's around that wasn't there 30 years ago, right? It was just in books or magazines or videotapes or something back then. But what did he say? Because I'm tired of being
depressed
and anxious. This is what's real interesting when it comes to pornography, is what it can do is it can create a lot of guilt and shame, number one. Number two, it can create depression, okay, because it's something that people are typically hiding. And number three, it can make you feel continually anxious until you get more of a fix again. In other words, there's a lull point after using that, and then there's a pick me back up that you feel anxious or desiring of needing it, especially when it's around certain times or places. So pornography, we always say, is a way to get all of the emotional, physical it gets you all the physical gratification without the emotional investment. So if you're actually with a person and you are in a sexual relationship or close to them, you are invested in a relationship with them, intimacy. Yeah. If you are looking at pornography, it is allowing you to get all the gratifying elements of it, but be in control and give nothing back. Sure. And so that's the danger there. So people, when they struggle with that, many times it's hard to have a real relationship because I don't know how to give myself to another person because now I feel really vulnerable. I don't know how to do that. I'd rather just stay over here in a corner and do that. So that's where pornography would come in. All the physical gratification, none of the emotional investment. Sure. And the way to deal with it is to put it out in front of you. In other words, know your danger spots, times, places, people, things that you typically need to go towards pornography, and keep yourself from those, letting people know. Getting yourself in physical company of other people where you're less likely to act out, and keeping yourself busy. Sure. And putting it out in front of you. Also, 12-step program is good for that. But it's not trying to just white knuckle it, squeeze your knuckles and try to do your best just to hold on. Yeah. You have to have a plan and a purpose. And that plan and purpose is, as you stop looking at pornography, you start feeling more. As you look at more pornography, you stop feeling more. That's what creates the depression and anxiety. Gotcha. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that part about being with other people is so big for any kind of addiction, honestly.
Any kind.
Except for being with people who struggle with the same thing. Yes. Like if that's how you
can't hang around with people who are still acting out.
Yeah. You got to hang out with people that will help you stay grounded.
But if you're a drinker and alcohol is your thing, and after work is the biggest time you typically drink, you want to find a place or people to be with after work for a decent period of time to get you used to not needing it anymore at that time. It's just safeguards.
Gotcha. All right. 2 more questions. There's a ton of questions. Y'all did so good about
I love it.
asking, but we only have time for 2 more. We will definitely get to them in a part 2.
Part 2?
Can you guys talk about the differences between someone normal and someone with an addictive personality?
Well, normal people are people who can go to a party, take drinking, a wedding, something like that. And if they're really not feeling like drinking, or, and everybody else at the wedding is and celebrating, they just don't really go to it. We were at a show one time recently, and there was a champagne toast or something. And Jill, my wife, who is like, hey, raise a glass. And there's people drinking all over the place. And she's like, I'm kind of just not feeling like it's not my thing. She just won't do it if it's not her thing. But she would tell you chocolate would be her addiction. And she's like, I'm not going to pass that up if it's there. It's kind of her thing to be able to do. And people who people who get around situations where you feel compulsively, you go to a casino. If you're not a gambling addict, you go into a casino and you really wouldn't want to spend your money, or you might throw a quarter in a machine or something just for entertainment as you're walking to the pool. The addicts will stay in the casino the entire time they're on the trip to Vegas, right? So you want to be able to know that normal people, just that normal acting people, don't require the substance to move on. So if they really feel like having it, they will. Other people won't. I remember treating somebody one time with a food addiction that would buffet hop. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't heard about it. This is about 20 years ago. I hadn't heard about it. But it was where they would go on like a Friday night and they would go to a buffet, eat all they could, get in the car, they'd go to the next buffet. Multiple buffets in an evening until they all got sick and threw up. That's the clear definition of addiction. So normal thinking people don't let that behavior, that substance, any of that stuff get in the way of their regular life.
Gotcha. All right. Last question. How do genetics play a role in addiction? Very interested in this.
I think they do.
But how?
I think there's a mixture
how
of
much?
things.
It's how much?
I feel like the environment probably plays more into it than the genetics. Just because somebody's genetically predisposed, like I have generations of addiction in my family, let's say, it means you are likely to become an addict if you use, okay? Because you're genetically predisposed. But if you don't use, you're very likely not to. It's the same thing with anybody, right? And I think the studies have shown if you can get somebody to like 20 years old or so without really much using of anything, they have a very good chance of not becoming an addict with something. But a lot of it happens before 20, and that's when the brain development is happening. That's the problem. The culturally, environmentally exposed child, teenager that grows up is huge because they see people using, they see peers using, they see society using in social media, and it becomes so normalized that they just kind of fall into it. Therefore, if you're genetically predisposed, you're in big trouble. Because if you're genetically predisposed and I'm not, like I don't have it in my family, let's say all the way back, you and I can go out drinking or smoking or using or whatever. You're way more likely to get addicted than me because I just haven't had it in my family. But if you stay away from it, you're okay. When it's around you, when your parents, when your friends, when your siblings, when your people at school, when people online you see using it in social media, it just becomes so normal. So I think the cult, to me, the society that you have around you has a much bigger role in it than the genetics.
Sure. But also, I think a lot of people might have trouble with genetics, like their parents both struggled or their grandparents, whatever. I hear a lot of people saying like for instance, if you're at a bar and your friend's like, "Hey, have a drink" or whatever, and somebody might say, "Oh, addiction runs in my family. I really don't want to try it just because I know what it," and people will be, "Oh man, it's okay, it's fine." But it's like, that's a smart person if you know that, just to not even get started, because it's so much more important to not get into addiction than when you're already in it.
Right.
To get
well,
out.
And that's why we've talked to you and Tony. You know, we have addiction on both lines of the family tree, so to speak. And so we talk about it from a young age about you're just predisposed to this. It's no different than cancer or something else that's going on. You have it all the way down the family line. Yeah. And you have to just be careful about it. So a lot of people don't know that. And look at NF, you know, the artist we've looked at.
Yeah, totally.
He has it all through himself. And from what it seems like, he hasn't fallen victim into that, but he did it through his art, through his craft, through his music of talking about not wanting to become that. So it is possible.
Totally. All right. Awesome show.
Wow, that was a lot.
If y'all want to see an extra episode, I want to make sure I didn't mention it at the beginning. Extra episode will be airing on the Monday after YouTube is seeing this. And it'll be for YouTube members and Patreon members, just at the minimum level. We're going to be playing the game. Y'all might have seen before the game, but some of y'all might not, because this is airing on our main YouTube channel. So some of y'all may have never seen this before. I always do a game, and I did it in the main episode. I'm going to switch it to the extra episode where I take a word and Tom has to guess trivia. I do trivia questions for that word. So I'll give you a hint, y'all a hint if you want to know the word is addict. And I'm going to do all the answers start with an ADDICT.
Oh, cool.
And if Tom gets all of them correct, that's how we're doing it. If Tom gets all of them correct, then we will give memberships away at our next live stream. So,
hopefully I do it right.
if y'all want a chance to, and I love to see y'all commenting on that. So
appreciate y'all listening.
But I appreciate y'all. If y'all want that extra episode, go get it. But that's going to do it. And appreciate you, Tom. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next
Reaction Therapy Podcast.